This video contains spoilers for Dalinar's storyline from Oathbringer. I love the sculpt of this miniature. I think Brother Wise really captured the Blackthorn's one word that I describe him by, which is momentum. And I wanted to capture that word in my painting and designing of his base. So in this video, I'll review my painting process for him, including how I did this Parshendi gore effect. Stick around to the end where I will share the winners and the participants of my Discord community's painting challenge from January 2025. So for this miniature, I knew I wanted to run him in one of my Warhammer armies. And I've recently been playing around with the Khorne army from Warhammer Age of Sigmar. And basically, they're very bloodthirsty, and they go out there and they just attack and charge. Very, very similar to what Dalinar does in Oathbringer flashbacks, as well as in the beginning of Way of Kings. So I decided to stick with a round base, 100mm round base, which is the same base size as Scarbrand from the Khorne roster. If you know Warhammer, you'll probably recognize that name. Anyway, so I knew I had this 100mm base that I needed. My intent with this whole diorama or base was to show Dalinar moving from one part of the battlefield to another on the Shattered Plains. And I initially wanted him kind of jumping across the chasm and running downhill into a group of Parshendi. But as I developed the base and got working on it, I decided just to have him solo on the base for now. Who knows, maybe later on I'll add some Parshendi on the base as well. After I was done making the base, I cleaned up my mat and then found some Parshendi that I had 3D printed earlier and started clipping off their bases. Now this is a thing that I learned. Clipping resin is a lot different than clipping plastic. And I've been told about this, but now I understand that resin really shatters while plastic more cuts. I'm used to plastic, my plastic miniatures. And so with Dalinar, I was able to really just use my hobby knife and my clippers to cut his feet out. But the Parshendi were a lot harder with that resin. So with Dalinar off his base, I went around and I glued on all these different rock formations to add some detail to the base so it didn't all look like one big slab of styrofoam at the end. To secure these bases and help it blend into the styrofoam, I mixed up some Mod Podge and some white glue, white Elmer's glue, to protect the styrofoam when I go and do a prime coat on this. So I learned this with my original Chasm Fiend, that styrofoam does not do well when it is spray painted. The spray paint eats the styrofoam, and so if you put Mod Podge on top of it, it will protect the styrofoam from that spray paint. After that had dried, came back in with some green stuff, and in the process spilled water all over my lap. So that was fun. But I soaked that back up and grabbed my green stuff, and I was able to go around and pad in and smooth out those ledges from those rock formations and make it a smooth transition onto the foam bases. So after that green stuff was on, and I glued the styrofoam onto the 100mm base, I decided to add a little bit of flair to the base and put on some rock buds. And so I harvested some rock buds from a 3D print of the Chol that I had and just clipped them off, and I glued them onto the base in a few different clusters. And then during this step, I added super glue all over the base and put baking soda on. Is it baking soda or baking powder? One of those two baking things. And that serves two purposes. Number one is the catalyst for the super glue, and so it'll instantly dry the super glue. And then it also gives a gritty texture to the base. And this adds some variety to the base, so it's not just the foam, but it has some grittiness here and there throughout it. So after that was dry, I went and primed the base in the brown that I had. Now this brown is a really ugly one, and so I came back in with a dark brown paint and painted the whole thing dark brown. So you see here, I'm using this orangish paste. This is Citadel's technical Martian Iron Earth paint. And what this is it's really thick, but you slather it on there and then it will dry and become kind of crackly. Now in hindsight, I did too much here. I've discovered that less is more when it comes to this special paint, this special crackle paint. There's a lot of crackle effect that will come out of this, and I should have just focused in on a few key areas to really make it pop and really make it interesting. With that dry, mixed red with that dark brown, and I put that all over the miniature to give it a nice dark red tone. This mixture was about 1 part red to 2 parts brown. Now with the base coat dry, it was time for me to come in with a shade, and I went with Agrak's Earth Shade for this as Citadel's paint. Could have done a strong tone. So this I slathered all over it to soak into the details. This was especially helpful with that crackle paint because it soaked in between the cracks and really exaggerated those details. So after the shade was dry, I came in with a highlight of a medium brown tone. And I'll be honest that using highlights is actually relatively new to me as a miniature painter. I used to just do base coats and shades, but coming back in with a dry brush highlight or an edge highlight really has leveled up my miniature painting ability. And I strongly encourage you, if you haven't done this yet, it's a really quick skill to learn with dry brushing. Edge highlighting is a little bit more tricky. I'm still not really that good at it, but dry brushing really makes it pop. So in order to get Dalinar on the base, I knew I couldn't just glue him on there because he would easily fall off when I am moving around the tabletop playing my games. And so I needed to pin him in to the base and glue him. Belt and suspenders type of situation. And so I marked a hole in his foot with my hobby knife, and then I came in with my hand drill and drilled a hole that was big enough to put a small part of a paper clip into that hole, and then drilled into the base and slid that paper clip into Dalinar's foot and then glued him onto the base. The top of the rock buds in the book art are purplish, and when I brought out this purple, it oozed out like that really fast. So that is one drawback of a dropper bottle like this, is it can sometimes get clogged and then bust open like that. So now I have a lot of purple paint that I have to waste. So with that purple paint, I came in and highlighted the top of the rock buds, kind of be the little flower on top. And then with any good base painting, you want to finish the rim with a solid color. I shaded him in Nuln Oil to really soak into the recesses there. After I glued him onto the base, I came back in with a gray and I brought back out the raised areas. So I actually put a lot of gray back on him and left that Nuln Oil soaked into the recesses. I always say this, you want to exaggerate the details on these miniatures because you're looking at them from far away. Exaggerating those a lot helps bring out those details. So after I did that gray highlight, I came back in with a light gray highlight to catch even more of those raised areas. Shout out to one of my Discord members for recommending the paintbrush that I currently have in my hand. Thank you for the recommendation. If you have hobby questions that you've encountered as you're working through your Stormlight miniatures, please join my Discord. We have an active community there already that we're working together to help each other as we paint these Stormlight miniatures together. With that highlight done, I decided to come in with a dry brush of Lead Belcher. And this is a metallic paint. I did this similar process with my Adolin Shardbearer, where all of it was traditional paint. There was no metallic on it. And then I came in and to add battle wear and tear, I dry brushed some metallic paint on there. Then I came in with that same paint and I painted Oathbringer. And then I got Shardblade Silver out, painted more of a highlight on it. So with the Shardblade done, I came back in and captured all the cracks in Dalinar's armor. as well as his face visor, because I wanted to have that subtle glow effect as if he was tainted by the thrill. I used that same white on Oathbringer to bring out some of the raised areas, and then I came into those cracks with a contrast paint, which is Blood Angel's Red Contrast from Citadel, and I painted it all around where the cracks were to soak in there and give it that red glow effect. So some of it was kind of staying on the outside, on the edges, to show the glow effect. I still need to get a lot better with glow effect, but I really like how this white and then contrast paint worked out. While I had that contrast paint out, I decided to color Oathbringer in that same color. I thought it would be kind of cool to be like, hey, this is the thrill. It even is taking over the shard blade. It gave an interesting effect, but I wasn't quite happy with it. I went back into that Oathbringer off camera and kind of undid a lot of that red to give it more of that original silver effect. So here's where I started experimenting with a new technique for blood splatters. I knew I wanted Blackthorn as if he had just plowed through some Parshendi, causing all kinds of damage. And so he would not be sparkling clean. He would be battle damaged and he would be covered in gore and blood. I use a technique that I found on YouTube where you get a bunch of paint on your brush and then you use a straw and you blow onto the paintbrush and it creates a splatter effect. This creates that random effect that would happen if you were to punch a Parshendi in the face with a shard fist. It was a trial and error situation where I was really nervous about this because I had just painted Dalinar it took me quite a few hours to get to this point, and I was about to go in with some random paint splatters on him. So I was very nervous. I did cover up the glow effect with that putty. So this splatter effect was my first attempt. I tried the straw, and then I started using my finger to kind of flick the paint onto the miniature, and I got some good results from it, but it wasn't quite what I needed all the way. So I got Uhu glue or Uhu glue, whatever it's called. That stuff is an adhesive that is very thick. It's very gooey, and I got my orange paints out and I mixed the orange paint with the glue. And as you mix it together, the glue takes on the color of the paint, and you can see right there, right? It's very stringy coming off of the palette. And I started putting it onto his feet. I started with his feet because I knew I needed him as if he had waded through some Parshendi gore. It was a lot of trial and error with this. I used quite a bit, and I'm using an old paintbrush. I'm not using a nice paintbrush here because the paintbrush is ruined now. But you can see as I hook it onto the foot and try to maneuver it around, it has that stringy effect, and it sometimes will break depending on how it goes. So I decided, I was like, hey, okay, so Dalinar is running, he's covered in blood, so there'd be footprints of gore in there. So I created a little bit of footprint there, and I attached from his foot to that footprint, I attached a string using a toothpick to give it momentum, right? I'm trying to go for the momentum effect. Having the gore flying through the air felt like it was, oh, this could be really good. This could kind of show that momentum. I try to envision, okay, how would Blackthorn be moving through these rocks? How would he be running? So I kind of did a quick little step there, and then a jump of his other foot onto the rock, and then kind of sailing through the air from that rock, right? So I did have that base of the flicking and the blood splatter effect, but after talking to a few people on my Discord community, which said, hey, I needed more of that effect to come out, otherwise it wasn't selling very well. And so at this point I had a really messed up paintbrush that was full of orange paint, and I was like, well, if I just start stabbing the mini, it will be kind of random, and that actually happened. So my random paintbrush bristles created that randomness that I needed to really sell that gore effect. You can see that I started out very timidly with this effect. As I progressed, I started adding more and more, and realizing that in order to sell this as a very aggressive and very dangerous individual, you need to have a lot. You need to have a lot on there to give it that really good, terrifying effect. So I kept it on his hands and forearms because throughout the books, right, the shard bearers are said to be using their fists and using their feet. And so his feet were covered, his fists were covered, his chest was covered from the splatters. And I decided to come back in with even thicker Yoo-hoo glue. And as you see, it's really difficult to get this situated. But I created this big string here back to that footprint to really give it the effect of, hey, this was quite a lot of gore. I came back in with my red contrast paint to give it a little bit more definition, instead of just orange blobs, but to give it some texture. After that dried, I showed that string and people were like, hey, that's not really selling it. And so I came in and I cut the string mostly off. I left some on the foot and some on the footprint to give that effect of flying through the air. The final step here was adding a gloss varnish. And so I put it all over where I had the orange. I put this varnish on it to make it shiny. This is typically not how I like to paint miniatures, so it kind of made me queasy going through this exercise. I'm not sure if I'll do it again, but it was a new technique for me. I learned a lot while doing this, and hopefully you can take this if you want. You can add your own flair to it. Would love to see what you have. So in January, we had our first Stormlight miniature painting challenge on my Discord server. So thank you to the 10 participants this month. A winner of this challenge was decided by popular vote on my Instagram page. And that winner was Elandrin, who painted this wonderful lift mini. And an honorable mention goes to Ed109's Vire, coming in just one vote shy of tying for that first place. Well done, everyone. And if you want to join the next challenge, hop onto my Discord server.